Literally torture through which she suffered, right? The kicking, the beating, the nails being pulled off, being put in a trunk.
I want everyone that was involved in this to be punished to the fullest extent. They had no right to take my daughter away from me.
On the cold morning of November 9, 2015, at around 9 a.m., a squirrel hunter in Talladega National Forest, Alabama made a hell-on-earth discovery. The lifeless body of a young woman was tied to a tree with barbed wire and grotesquely mutilated. Her severed head lay several feet away from her body. Authorities rushed to the scene and realized the victim was 29-year-old Samantha Payne, who had just been reported missing. Her body told a harrowing tale of violence and torture, leaving investigators grasping for answers. Was it some kind of ritual sacrifice? What if a predator, lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting to strike again? Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most haunting investigations in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama's history, the creepy case of Samantha Payne. Samantha Christine Payne was born on October 30, 1986, in Dallas County, Alabama. She was part of a loving, close-knit family. Her parents, Roy and Suzanne Payne, her two protective brothers, Stephen and Jonathan, and her sister Katrina, who was her closest confidant. Those who knew Samantha described her as kind-hearted, a woman with an open heart and infectious smile. Her forgiving nature was both her greatest strength and, tragically, her most vulnerable trait. Samantha worked hard to support herself through college and juggled part-time jobs while still finding time for her friends. However, in her mid-20s, Samantha's life took a darker turn. She fell in with the wrong circle of friends. They introduced her to crystal meth. Despite her parents' desperate attempts to help her break free, the drug soon became a dangerous habit that altered the course of Samantha's life. October 30, 2015 was Samantha's 29th birthday. She was excited to attend a Halloween party and planned to dress up as Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. But she felt nervous, thinking her friends might make fun of her costume. Samantha's mother encouraged her to embrace the moment and enjoy her special day. As Samantha left the house with a big smile, her parents could never imagine it would be the last time they saw her alive. The next days, Samantha did not return home and could not be contacted. Her mother, Suzanne, frantically called the police and reported a missing person. 10 days later, on November 9, 2015, a squirrel hunter named Jeffrey Elliott was trekking through Talladega National Forest in Alabama. As he neared South Sandy Road, an area dense with trees and thick brush, he saw something that would sear into his memory forever. There, tied to a tree with barbed wire, was the naked and headless body of a woman. Her severed head was grotesquely discarded about 14 feet from the tree. Her body, beaten and mutilated, showed signs of decomposition, like it was left there to rot in the wilderness. Jeffrey, in a state of shock, immediately contacted the authorities. Within minutes, deputies from the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office arrived. As seasoned investigators, they had seen their fair share of crime scenes, but nothing prepared them for this horror. They were dealing with a crime of unparalleled savagery. Investigators quickly realized that identifying the victim would be no easy task. Pieces of the mutilated body were swiftly transported to Tuscaloosa County Medical Examiner's office, while investigators scoured the grim scene, desperate for answers. At first glance, the scene looked like a horror movie, an act that appeared to be a ritualistic killing. But as investigators searched the area, they found no altars, symbols, or any markings associated with cults or sacrifices. The absence of these elements led them to reconsider their initial theory. Perhaps the crime was not ritualistic after all. Could it have been something far more personal and calculated? The lack of forensic evidence left investigators frustrated even more. There were no tire tracks, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle, and no personal belongings near the body. It seemed the forest was eerily devoid of clues. This led investigators to a new theory: the victim might have been attacked elsewhere and then brought to this isolated spot to die. But just when it seemed like the case would hit a dead end, two unexpected developments turned the investigation on its head. That very day, back at the sheriff's office, Samantha Payne's missing persons report caught the detectives' attention. The timing, the details, it all seemed eerily close to the crime they were investigating. Could the unidentified victim be Samantha? However, the remains were decomposed so bad that investigators couldn't simply match the face to Samantha's photo. The woman's body was too far gone for visual confirmation. All eyes turned to the coroner's report. Dr. Stephen Dunton, the medical examiner assigned to the case, faced the grim task of identifying the victim and determining the cause of death. Samantha's body had been severely decomposed, and her injuries were extensive. Her ribs were broken, her body covered in deep cuts. Her fingernails and teeth were forcibly removed. In the most disturbing detail, her internal organs were missing. Dr. Dunton had to consider whether the organs were deliberately removed by the killer or scavenged by wild animals. However, the barbed wire bound her to the tree, the brutal decapitation, and the mutilation left no doubt that this was a deliberate and cold-blooded homicide. Despite the lack of clear answers, Dr. Dunton was able to extract DNA from the remains and send it for comparison with samples from Samantha's family, hoping to confirm the victim's identity. As Tuscaloosa County investigators anxiously awaited the DNA results, a new lead emerged that sent the investigation down a chilling new path. A sheriff's deputy from neighboring Hale County called in with a crucial piece of information. About 10 days prior, residents near the Talladega National Forest had reported a suspicious vehicle abandoned along South Sandy Road, the very area where the body was found. The deputy had investigated and stumbled upon two individuals walking along the roadside, 27-year-old Stephen George and 18-year-old Chili Bruce. Claiming they had run out of gas and were forced to abandon their vehicle, the couple's story might have been dismissed, if not for one alarming detail: their clothes were covered in blood. The deputy searched them and found crystal meth, leading to their arrest on drug charges. Now, Stephen and Chili were sitting in Hale County Jail, and investigators began to wonder, were Stephen and Chili connected to Samantha's murder? On the morning of November 10, 2015, investigators from the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office arrived at Hale County Jail to question Stephen George and Chili Bruce. Their objective: uncover any information linking them to the grisly discovery in the Talladega National Forest. When asked if they knew Samantha Payne, both immediately confirmed she was a friend. The interrogation took a shocking turn when they confessed that the body found was indeed Samantha's. More disturbingly, they admitted to being involved in the events leading up to her death. However, they denied being responsible for killing Samantha. Instead, they pointed to another man, 31-year-old Michael David Belcher. According to Chili, Michael and Samantha had once been in a relationship, but they remained friends after breaking up. On Sunday, November 1, 2015, everything changed. Chili revealed that Michael decided to kill Samantha after she threatened to report him for stealing her car. Chili's confession also revealed another chilling detail: the vehicle abandoned near the forest didn't belong to Stephen or Chili. It was Michael Belcher's car, and inside the vehicle, there was evidence that could directly link him to Samantha's murder. Michael Belcher's car, impounded at Hale County, was quickly transferred to Tuscaloosa for forensic analysis. Investigators ran the vehicle's registration and confirmed what Stephen and Chili had claimed: the car indeed belonged to Michael Belcher. This bombshell gave investigators a crucial lead, but Chili's cryptic responses left them with more questions than answers. The full story had not been told. Nonetheless, Stephen and Chili were immediately transferred to the Tuscaloosa County Jail, where they were charged with capital murder and held without bail, pending further interrogation. Meanwhile, investigators faced the hard task of informing Samantha's family that their daughter had been brutally murdered. What began as a missing person case had spiraled into a nightmare. On November 11, 2015, Michael Belcher was brought in for questioning by the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office. From the moment he sat down, Michael was defiant and uncooperative. He denied having any involvement in Samantha Payne's disappearance or murder, despite the mounting evidence against him. But investigators weren't about to let him go without a fight. Stephen and Chili had already confessed to witness Michael kill Samantha. They offered to testify against Michael in exchange for a plea deal. Investigators now had two key witnesses who were willing to cooperate, and they had a plan to bring Samantha's killer to justice. And so began the chilling story leading to Samantha's horrific murder, as recounted by Stephen George and Chili Bruce. It all started on Halloween night. What began as a drug-fueled party spiraled into a nightmare that would last long after midnight and into the following day. The group, Michael Belcher, Stephen George, Chili Bruce, Samantha Payne, along with two other friends, 22-year-old Alyssa Watson and 34-year-old Marcus George, had gathered at a motorcycle repair shop owned by Michael's father. The shop had become their usual hangout spot, where they often gathered to drink and use drugs, with Michael as their self-proclaimed leader. By the evening of November 1, 2015, the six of them were deep into a meth binge. At some point, when Samantha went to use the bathroom, Stephen came up with a reckless idea: steal Samantha's car. As the others snickered, Stephen slipped Samantha's keys from her handbag, and the three men, Stephen, Michael, and Marcus, drove off in her car. Oddly, when Samantha returned, she seemed unaware of the men's absence and didn't notice her car was gone. Hours later, the men returned, and the drug-induced haze continued. Stephen later whispered to Chili and Alyssa that they had stripped Samantha's car, stealing the catalytic converter and battery before setting it on fire. They laughed, seemingly unbothered by the destruction. Much later, as the group prepared to leave, Samantha finally noticed her car was missing. When she asked about it, her so-called friends brushed it off as a joke, trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation. But Samantha wasn't amused. She grew increasingly angry, and her patience snapped. She threatened to call the police. That's when the night took a terrifying turn. Michael knew Samantha's car was beyond recovery; it had been burned beyond recognition. Worse, he realized that if she went to the police, they'd not only be charged with vehicle theft but also with possession of meth. The situation had escalated beyond what Michael could control. Panic set in. Michael decided Samantha had to be silenced. According to Stephen and Chili, Michael's reaction to Samantha's threat was immediate and violent. He lunged at Samantha, throwing her to the ground with brutal force. He unleashed a vicious assault, kicking and punching her until her face was bloodied and swollen. Samantha, badly injured, was unable to fight back. Michael, along with Stephen and Marcus, tied her up and threw her into the trunk of Michael's car. With no plan, no destination, they drove aimlessly through the night while Samantha cried out in pain and begged for help. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Her night of suffering had only just begun. The group eventually arrived at Michael's house, where the nightmare escalated. Before anyone entered, Michael turned to Samantha and coldly ordered her to strip naked. Humiliated and terrified, Samantha was forced to walk into the house, completely exposed, in front of the people she had once called her friends. The shame and degradation she endured in those moments were almost unbearable. Inside, Michael and the others bound her wrists and ankles using makeshift restraints, cables, shoelaces, and a belt. Then, the beating resumed. This time more brutal, lasting for hours. Samantha, helpless and broken, had no chance of escape. In Chili's chilling confession, letting Samantha live was never an option. After the hours-long torture, the group once again stuffed her into the trunk of Michael's car and set off for the Talladega National Forest, where the final, horrifying chapter of violence would unfold. During the drive, Samantha, desperate to survive, tried to claw her way out of the trunk. But her merciless captors forced her back inside, struck her with sticks until her desperate attempts to escape fell silent. When they reached the secluded forest, Samantha was dragged from the trunk, her frail body beaten and broken. Summoning her last ounce of strength, she scratched Michael's face and tried to flee, but they quickly overpowered her. Samantha begged for mercy, promising to forgive them, pleading that she would never tell a soul, but she was completely ignored. The group tied her to a tree with barbed wire, ensuring she could not escape her cruel fate. Alyssa and Chili, in a twisted attempt to cover their tracks, used a knife to rip out Samantha's fingernails and toenails, hoping to destroy any DNA evidence she had collected while fighting back. They even took it a step further. Using pliers, they pulled out several of her teeth. Throughout the unspeakable agony, Samantha continued to profess her love and forgiveness for them, her words heartbreakingly ignored. The final act of violence came as the group watched Michael, fueled by anger and paranoia, take a knife and cut Samantha across her body. After hours of torment, Samantha could no longer fight back. In her last moments, Michael plunged the knife into her neck and slit her throat, ending her life in a horrific crescendo of violence. Once Samantha was dead, the group discarded her severed head a few feet away from the body, further desecrating her remains. They left her bound to the tree, naked, mutilated, and alone in the middle of the forest. Then, they fled the scene, hoping that their crime would go undiscovered. When investigators heard the graphic details from Stephen and Chili, they were left shaken, disgusted by the sheer cruelty and inhumanity. Samantha's final moments had been marked by unimaginable suffering at the hands of those she once trusted. Investigators were resolute to bring her killers to justice. With a clear path ahead, they swiftly executed search warrants for Michael's home and vehicle, determined to uncover the evidence that would seal his fate. With Stephen and Chili's confessions in hand, investigators moved quickly to arrest Michael Belcher, Stephen George, and Chili Bruce. Inside Michael's house, investigators found the car battery Stephen and Chili had described, the same one they had stolen from Samantha's car. A further search of Michael's car uncovered women's clothing, stained with blood, leaving no doubt that the evidence was piling up against him. To confirm the horrifying truth, Samantha's grieving parents provided DNA samples, which were tested against the remains found in the forest. The results were undeniable. The body was indeed Samantha Payne. Further testing also confirmed that the blood found on Chili and Stephen's clothes, as well as the blood-stained clothing in Michael's car, matched Samantha's DNA. With these damning results in hand, investigators arrested the remaining suspects, Alyssa Watson and Marcus George, on November 13, 2015. Their statements echoed Chili and Stephen's confession, confirming the horrific events. Both Alyssa and Marcus were charged with first-degree kidnapping and held on a $60,000 bond. Investigators also uncovered Samantha's burned car beneath the Harrisburg Bridge in Bibb County, Alabama, just as Stephen and Chili had described. The puzzle pieces were all falling into place, and it was clear that justice was on its way for Samantha Payne. Armed with the physical evidence and the confessions of all four suspects, investigators turned their focus back to Michael Belcher. But Michael remained defiant despite overwhelming evidence against him. However, knowing time was running out, Michael called his mother, asking what he should do. Her advice was simple: be honest. In a heartbreaking twist, Michael asked her to take care of his cat while he was in jail. Shortly after, Michael was formally arrested and charged with capital murder. He was remanded in custody without bond. As the trials approached, prosecutors knew they needed to rely heavily on the suspects' testimony. Chili and Stephen had already accepted plea deals. They pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences and agreed to testify against Michael as key eyewitnesses. Faced with the inevitable, Michael finally crumbled and chose to plead guilty. Michael Belcher, desperate to avoid the harshest consequences, sought the same plea deal like Stephen. But prosecutors rejected his plea without hesitation. They were determined to make sure that Michael, the mastermind behind Samantha's brutal murder, faced the maximum punishment Alabama law could impose. Meanwhile, Alyssa Watson and Marcus George continued to proclaim their innocence, fiercely denying any involvement. Both turned down plea deals offered by the prosecution, choosing to fight the charges. After posting bond, they were temporarily released from jail. On December 22, 2015, Judge Jim Quinn ruled that there was sufficient evidence to hold Michael Belcher, Chili Bruce, and Stephen George behind bars, pending trial. The judge's decision paved the way for their cases to be presented before a grand jury, where the full weight of justice would soon be brought to bear on those responsible for Samantha Payne's horrific death.
After hearing graphic details in court about the murder of Samantha Payne, a judge decided there's probable cause to keep the three suspects charged with capital murder in jail.
Right after that, Judge Jim Quinn delivered another pivotal decision, declaring that Alyssa Watson and Marcus George would also face a grand jury. Despite their claims of innocence, the judge's ruling ensured that their involvement in Samantha Payne's tragic death would be thoroughly examined, leaving no room to escape justice.
Investigators say Marcus George and Alyssa Watson were also involved. They were both charged with kidnapping for their roles in the murder. This case will now go to a grand jury. No date has been set.
On January 15, 2016, 18-year-old Chili Bruce stood before the court and pleaded guilty to the charge of murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after just 5 years as part of the plea deal. Additionally, she was ordered to complete the Alabama Therapeutic Education Facility program for drug rehabilitation. The first to face trial, however, were Alyssa Watson and Marcus George. In November 2018, both chose to gamble their futures, turning down plea deals and pleading not guilty. They claimed to have left the forest before Samantha's murder, hoping to distance themselves from the gruesome crime. But their risk didn't pay off. Chili Bruce took the stand and delivered the damning testimony, implicating Alyssa and Marcus in the entire ordeal. Prosecutors bolstered her account with cell phone location data, which placed Alyssa and Marcus at the crime scene during the murder. Their claims of innocence crumbled under the weight of evidence. On December 17, 2018, the jury found Alyssa and Marcus guilty of first-degree kidnapping and felony murder. Both were sentenced to 30 years in prison for each charge. Although the Alabama Court of Appeals later vacated the kidnapping conviction, the 30-year sentence for murder was upheld. During sentencing, pleas for leniency poured in from their families. Alyssa was pregnant, expecting a baby boy, and Marcus was a young father whose family needed him. Marcus offered a tearful apology to Samantha's family, expressing deep regret for his decisions. But Alyssa remained silent, declining to address the court. Samantha's mother, Suzanne Payne, spoke passionately to the jury, describing Alyssa and Marcus as two of the coldest and most evil non-human creatures she had ever encountered. She hoped they would forever be haunted by Samantha's pleas for mercy. Both Alyssa and Marcus are currently serving their sentences, set for release in 2048. In March 2019, the highly anticipated trials of Chili Bruce, Stephen George, and Michael Belcher began. Chili, already pleading guilty after her arrest, had her 20-year sentence upheld, with eligibility for parole after 5 years. Stephen George, like Chili Bruce, ultimately pleaded guilty to the murder of Samantha Payne, hoping for leniency through a plea deal. In court, he provided a detailed account of how Michael Belcher brutally killed Samantha, his testimony aligning with Chili's. However, the jury saw Stephen's role in the crime as more pivotal than he had hoped. After all, it was Stephen who had suggested stealing Samantha's car, leading to her horrific death. Despite the plea deal offering the possibility of a reduced sentence, the jury found Stephen deeply complicit in Samantha's murder. They believed he had played a significant role in her suffering, and as a result, Stephen was sentenced to life in prison. His cooperation saved him from the death penalty by the narrowest of margins, but life behind bars would be his fate. Michael Belcher's trial was one of the most highly anticipated in recent memory. He had been painted as the mastermind behind the brutal killing, the ringleader who had orchestrated Samantha's torture and death. Armed with the testimony of Stephen George and Chili Bruce, the prosecution argued that Michael had always intended to kill Samantha once she threatened to report him. His violent, drug-fueled rage had reached a breaking point, and Samantha had become his target. During the trial, the graphic details of Samantha's final hours were revealed in court, leaving the jury and those in attendance horrified. Michael's defense team tried to argue that he was not solely responsible for the murder, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was the one to deliver the fatal blow, and the one to desecrate Samantha's body in the forest. On April 3, 2019, Judge Brad Almond, following the jury's recommendation, sentenced Michael Belcher to death by lethal injection. As he stood before the court, Michael claimed he was truly sorry for what had happened to Samantha, insisting that words could never convey the depth of his sorrow. But for Samantha's grieving mother, Suzanne Payne, his apology rang hollow. She could not believe that Michael was capable of genuine remorse for his monstrous actions. As of 2024, Chili Bruce is set to be released on probation at age 26, while Stephen remains imprisoned for life. Michael, sentenced to death, now waits on death row at Holman Prison. For Samantha Payne's family, the trials and convictions of those responsible for her death offered a sense of justice, but no amount of courtroom victories could heal the deep wounds left by her brutal murder. Roy and Suzanne Payne, Samantha's parents, were left devastated by the loss of their daughter. They have likened the loss of their daughter to a summer without the sun and a winter without the cold. Suzanne has since dedicated her life to keeping Samantha's memory alive, sharing her story so the world never forgets the bright, kind-hearted young woman taken far too soon. Samantha Payne's story is a tragic reminder of trusting the wrong people. Her killers exploited her trusting nature and, in the end, used it to take her life. Do you believe any of Samantha's killers have shown true remorse? Was justice truly served for each person involved? Especially that Chili Bruce will soon walk free, despite her direct involvement in the torture and abuse that led to Samantha's death. As always, thank you for watching and for being a part of this journey. Remember to subscribe, like and share. If there's a crime story you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Until next time, stay safe, and always be mindful of who you trust.